Hey everybody, this is Death by D4, and this is the story of when I, became a gender-swapped ghost. Yeah, there's a lot to go over, so be sure to subscribe and let's dive right on in. So this story comes from a Halloween one-shot that I was lucky enough to play in. I was playing as this boisterous shifter artificer named Baxter Cortez, and my fellow party members were a human cleric and a gnome rogue. The session began with our party setting up a camp nearby a ruined tower. However, sometime into the night, we were suddenly ambushed by a raging stone giant that was hellbent on ending all of our lives. However, seeing as that we were actually pretty well set up to try and handle it, we did our best to try and hold down our position and attempt to kill it. Well, at least we certainly tried to. Early on, our rogue got hit with a giant boulder and was instantly killed by it, leaving me to try and support our cleric as he desperately tried to hold back the giant's advance. Then, after a very unfortunate critical hit with its giant club, the cleric went down too, leaving me to face the giant completely on my own. Well, seeing as there was nothing else left I could do at this point, I drank my experimental flight elixir and took to the sky in an attempt to try and save myself. Unfortunately, my flying speed from that elixir was rather short, and after one more inevitable boulder toss in my general direction, I became only of interest to historians. Oh, and fun fact, when I was killed by that boulder, it dealt a whopping 69 bludgeoning damage to me. So, nice. Anyway, after we suffered that TPK, we then suddenly found out that we were actually still alive. Well, kind of. You see, after I awakened from my death, I found myself in some sort of dark laboratory chamber, a place that I had absolutely no recollection of at the time. Before me, there were a couple of tables outfitted with all sorts of strange and hideous tools, and centering the room were these two stone altars, each adorned with a mummified corpse. Upon inspection, I found that one of them was the mummified corpse of a woman, which I didn't recognize. And upon inspecting the other one, I found that mummy to be myself. Yeah, talk about an existential crisis, am I right? Anyway, amidst my confusion, I then looked down at myself and realized kind of what was going on, well, at least somewhat. You see, I'd been transformed into a ghost. But that wasn't the most alarming thing about the whole being an undead kind of thing. No, I wasn't just a ghost, but I was in fact the ghost of a human woman that my dungeon master then best described to me as a highly attractive resemblance of a long forgotten muse of mine. Well, as nice as that was, I was still horribly confused by that whole endeavor. So much so that I even asked my dungeon master if I was even still playing as Baxter Cortez. At that point, they then assured me that I was, and that I had every right to be confused at the given moment. Well, at least I had that much going for me, right? Seriously, being put in a position like this so randomly was really tough for me to try and deal with, and I ended up struggling quite a lot when it came to role-playing my character correctly in this given situation. To my credit, I tried my damnedest with it, but it was definitely something I was unprepared to try and handle that evening. Anyway, at this point, I decided to inspect the mummies on the altar in front of me and tried to see if I could use either of them as a possible body. You see, though I could still attack things as a ghost, I couldn't exactly interact with anything in the physical world, so I felt that I should at least try and resolve this issue right then and there. Unfortunately, though my DM told me that I would be allowed to possess other undead creatures, I couldn't possess these mummies because they had not been reanimated. Oh well. So without much other guidance, I then decided to try and explore the laboratory a bit more and figure out what was going on. Well, after poking around for a little bit, I eventually pieced together a rough picture of everything that had been happening. You see, it appeared that this laboratory belonged to some kind of necromancer, shocker I know, and that they were in the middle of raising an undead army for themselves. Again, shocker I know. However, though I never found exactly why they were doing this, since most necromancers don't tend to be very nice people in general, I just assumed that it was all bad news in general. After that, I then made my way over to some kind of prison area, where I then found this giant zombie ogre walking around the halls. Well, seeing as this was possibly the best body I was going to find for myself at any point, I then made an attempt to try and possess the zombie ogre. Fortunately, I nailed my roll and I was able to successfully take control of its body. However, as nice as it was being whole again, being some giant, rotten, colossal monster wasn't exactly as appealing to me as being a somewhat attractive spirit. So even in spite of this benefit, I quickly planned on ditching this body as soon as I could find a better one. Fortunately, that wouldn't actually take that much longer for me, as I then heard the jangling of chains from inside one of the prison cells. Upon inspecting it, I found that there was a ghoul and a ghast locked up inside of it, demanding to be set free. After talking to them for a little bit, I then found out that they were, in fact, my former allies, as they had shared in my unfortunate fate of being transformed into an undead monstrosity. That said, the conversation trying to explain the fact that I was, in fact, Baxter Cortez was a lot more difficult than it needed to be. But eventually the matter was settled, and then I used the ogre's key ring to be able to set my allies free. Then, seeing as this was a good time as any to drop off the ogre behind, I depossessed its body inside the cell and we locked him up inside. Sure, it could have been useful for us to keep the zombie ogre, but I actually couldn't leave through the doorway that I'd originally phased through. So this ended up being necessary in the long run. On our way out, we then came upon another prison cell holding a skeleton and a zombie. After talking to them for a little bit, we found out that they were actually friendly and willing to help us try and escape from the dungeon. Seeing as that we had very little to lose in the matter, we decided to set them free and they joined our party. Then later on, as we continued our way back through the laboratory, we passed through a room with a large collection of jars held inside of it, each housing some kind of smaller undead creature within it. After taking a look through the collection, we settled on taking some jars, each containing a crawling claw, a will-o-wisp, and a goddamn flame skull. Seriously, as awesome as it was to find this, I was terribly against the whole idea of taking the flame skull in general, as those things are just super scary with their ability to cast fireball. And upon talking to the flame skull, it wasn't like it was a very agreeable thing in there to begin with. However, since the ghast in our party wouldn't take no for an answer, we decided to just keep our distance from him and just continue along our way. Finally, we made our way back to the room where I had first awakened, and we were prepared to then continue on our way through to whatever lay beyond it. However, just before we did, we were then suddenly surprised when the two mummies upon the altars reanimated and began to attack us. Yes, you heard me right. My old, dead, decaying, and completely devoid of spirit body suddenly reanimated and attempted to kill me. Well, if I hadn't been having an existential crisis before, I certainly was having one now. So seeing as I was extremely spooked by what was happening, instead of trying to make an attempt to reclaim my old body, I opted instead to possess the other mummy instead. It just felt like things were just getting way too weird at this point. So after successfully possessing the other mummy, my old body then had its turn in combat and, in a crazy turn of events, went after our zombie ally and proceeded to crit him twice. And then our zombie ally failed his undead fortitude saving throw by rolling a natural 1. Yeah, no joke. So much for our new friend, I guess. So after that encounter, we eventually defeated my old body and watched it as it dissolved into dust. Then, after we briefly grieved for the loss of our zombie comrade, we chained up my current mummy body and then continued along our way. Sure, we could have kept the mummy's body, as mummies are very powerful undead to begin with, but my ability to just snatch up one of our enemies during combat and then use them as an ally instead was just really useful for us in general right now. So we decided to try and make that strategy work and continue along with our escape. In the next room, we happened upon a small stash of arcane loot, all of which was likely belonging to the foreshadowed necromancer that I'd heard about. Of the items we found there, one took an immediate interest to us, which was a ring of 3 wishes. Yeah, seriously. No idea why it was there, but it was. That said, it did unfortunately only have 1 wish left remaining in it, but it was still the best ticket that we had of being able to return ourselves back to our former lives. However, after we took a moment to consider our options, I wasn't entirely sure it was the right time to actually use the ring yet. After all, we still had to try and escape from the dungeon. None of us wanted to end up wasting the ring by just dying before we even got out. However, after one of my allies made a point of us being undead trying to face down against a necromancer, we decided that reviving ourselves was probably the best option that we could have for ourselves. So with that in mind, we then decided to use the ring to cast a wish upon ourselves and bring ourselves back to life at 20th level. All of us being including us and our skeleton zombie allies. Sure, this was going very far with the wish that we wanted, but that's what we settled on, so we gave it a try. So as we raised up the ring into the air and proclaimed our desire, the ring flashed into brilliant light and nothing happened. At first we wondered if the spell had simply failed, but then we thought about it a bit more, we realized exactly what we had done wrong. You see, we had forgotten to specify exactly when we wanted our wish to actually take effect. Kinda dumb, right? Well, that's the hand we were dealt, and we decided to stick with it. And seeing as there was little else we could do at this point, we gathered up whatever things we had and then continued on our way towards the surface. After peeking my way up through a trap door, we'd finally found our way out. Unfortunately though, the way out was blocked by the villainous necromancer, who, at that moment, appeared to be in the middle of creating a flesh golem for himself. So, in seeing as this was the best time as any to try this out, we pulled out the jar containing the flame skull and just hucked it into the room ahead of us. Then, after the impending explosion soon to follow, we leapt up from under the floor and began our attack against him. Now, my first priority during the encounter was to try and possess the flesh golem. That way I could then remove it as a threat to us and then use it in order to aid my allies. That, and I highly suspected that the necromancer would have some way of resisting my possession ability, so I wasn't even going to bother trying it on him. However, despite having an 85% chance of successfully possessing the flesh golem, our dungeon master then proceeded to roll for themselves a natural 20 on the saving throw, which utterly ruined my plans then and wasted my possession charge. After that, all hell kind of broke loose at that point. Our ghoul and our ghast made an effort to try and paralyze the necromancer, which failed. The necromancer then cast suggestion on our ghast and ordered him to restrain our ghoul, which he successfully did. And I repeatedly failed to recharge my possession ability, forcing me instead to just try and attack everything I could. In the end, as the Flameskull then proceeded to almost burn the entire room to a crisp. The Necromancer then cast Misty Step and teleported himself outside of the room. Seeing as I was the only one who could actually follow him at the given time, I phased out of the wall and then gave chase to him out into the surrounding forest. At that point, I actually realized that we were still at the tower where we had last died, so at least we weren't very far from where we had last been before. Anyway, after successfully sneaking up behind the fleeing Necromancer, I then successfully landed a critical hit max damage Withering Touch straight into his fear-ridden heart, bringing a swift end to his villainous life. Soon after that, we did away with the Flesh Golem, which was pretty easy, considering with how much fire there was everywhere. And to our good fortune, our wish finally came true, granting us back our original lives and bodies. Not only that, but the zombie and the skeleton we befriended along the way there were also revived, granting us a lovely female paladin and a noble male sorcerer to aid us in whatever upcoming adventures we happen to find ourselves in. As for me, I was in fact given back my original body, despite the rather serious changes I had undergone during my time as a spirit. Honestly, I was relieved to have it that way, and I'm sure Baxter was as well. So, with the matter of the Necromancer having been dealt with, and our lives having been restored, that brought an end to our one-shot. Oh, and for those of you who wondered exactly why Baxter got gender swapped after death, well, turns out there actually wasn't a reason for it, as my Dungeon Master had just done that in order to troll me. Well, you know what? Thumbs up to you, Dungeon Master. I'll be sure to return the favor to you one day. And that's it. If you liked the video, then be sure to subscribe and let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you'd like to have the chance to play D&D with me, then feel free to join my Discord server. And consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see all of you in the next video.